Hi, I'm Rob Olson. I am an English teacher at Pittsford High School in Pittsford, Michigan. I've been an English teacher since 1993. I graduated from Northern Michigan University with a degree in English and German, and I went on to earn my Master's of Education at Spring Arbor College in Spring Arbor, Michigan. Today I'm going to do something somewhat different. I'm going to read the preface of a book called The War Against Grammar by Dr. David Mulroy, who is, or perhaps was, he's probably retired now, a classics professor from the early 70s. And he is seen as a professor at UW-Milwaukee from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. The verbal skills of students decline. He is an outsider. He's from outside the National Council of Teachers of English, the K-12 ed school monopoly, really a ghetto that we tend to only hear the same thing, the same cliches. And this is a scholar who has written a fabulous book, and it really, I think, completely refutes the National Council of Teachers of English and the party line that they've had for a couple of generations now, which has produced two generations of teachers that would not be able to teach grammar, as the Washington Post has said, even if they wanted to teach grammar. I'd love to talk about this. This is not a trivial topic. It's significant. And I think it's something that would be well worth talking about. This is the first of 3 videos I'd like to do. And after I do this video, I would like to read the foreword of the book, and then the first chapter, which is online, available for free online. And I'd like to read that and perhaps have some discussion about that as well. I hope you find it interesting, even if you disagree with me and you're solidly in the camp of the NCTE. At least we can have some conversations about this, because this is highly significant. Okay? Hope you enjoy this. I have taught classics, i.e. ancient Greek and Roman language, literature, and history at the University of Wisconsin since 1973. During these years, I've noticed a decline in the verbal abilities of my students. It is embodied in the difficulties that they have in reading comprehension and English composition, as well as in the fact that few are capable of studying a foreign language successfully. The cause of this decline has never seemed mysterious to me. My students generally lack an understanding of basic grammatical concepts. Put most simply, they cannot classify words by part of speech. Most can identify prototypical examples of nouns, adjectives, verbs, and adverbs, but beyond that, they are in the dark. Few know that am is a verb, for example. It is rare to encounter a student who can define participles. Until 1996, I did not suspect that anyone questioned the value of knowing the parts of speech. They provide the basic taxonomy of words. The first step in mastering any field is gaining an overview of its structure, which requires classification of its elements. For example, I was a baseball fan as a youngster and effortlessly learned by heart the starting lineups, excluding pitchers, of all the teams in the American League. In those days, teams were fewer in number and positions more stable, but I could not have memorized a list of 64 names without a matrix provided by the different defensive positions. This is merely a matter of common sense. To get a handle on the data in the field, the first thing you must do is sort them out to a reasonable system of classification. The meaning of a sentence is created in part by the rules of grammar. Of these, the most important apply not to individual words, but to whole classes of them, i.e., the parts of speech. For example, A declarative sentence is a proposition about a subject, which is represented by a noun or a pronoun. The sense of the proposition is contained in the predicate, which begins with a finite verb, not a participle, and so on. Though we understand the sense of most utterances intuitively, the only reliable way to interpret obscure ones is through grammatical analysis, and that presupposes knowing the parts of speech. Moreover, if we wish to improve the ways in which we express ourselves, either in writing or in speaking, we must think about grammatical patterns. For example, it is good advice to use the passive voice sparingly, but to benefit from that rule, we have to understand what is meant by passive voice, i.e., it consists of a form of the verb be plus a past participle. Finally, grammar is the foundation of the study of foreign language. The reason that contemporary American students struggle with infinitives, participles, articles, demonstratives, and direct and indirect objects in foreign language classes is that they know very little about these entities in English. In 1996, Wisconsin's Department of Public Instruction was drafting a new set of academic standards for the state's public schools and invited suggestions from the general public. At a public hearing, I recommended that high school seniors be required to identify the 8 parts of speech in a selection of normal prose, thinking that such a modest and reasonable suggestion would be immediately embraced by all concerned. I followed this recommendation with a letter to the editor of the Milwaukee Journal. To my surprise, I found myself embroiled in controversy. While the educational experts in charge of drafting the standards expressed no interest in adopting my suggestion, it was endorsed by a parents' group advocating educational reforms. This led to my brief involvement in the drafting of Wisconsin's academic standards. During this process, I discovered that my suggestion ran directly counter to conventional wisdom among experts in K-12 education. A consultant working for the Department of Public Instruction kindly showed me a printout from the internet entitled Facts on the Teaching of Grammar. This was a web page produced by the National Council of Teachers of English, the nation's leading professional group of English teachers, the equivalent of the American Medical Association or the American Bar Association. According to this website, decades of research had shown that instruction in formal grammar did not accomplish any positive goals and was actually harmful because it took time away from more profitable activities. The use of the term, quote, formal grammar in NCTE statements confused me for some time. Grammar is all formal. It consists entirely of rules and definitions. I eventually perceived that what the NCTE actually opposes is formal instruction in grammar, i.e., asking students to memorize definitions, classify words by part of speech, parse verbs, and so forth. The Council does not oppose the incidental use of grammatical terms and explanations by teachers. A teacher may mention, for example, that, quote, some people call this word a participle. But asking a student to say what a participle is, or even to point to one, would be viewed as counterproductive. That the Professional Association of English Teachers should issue a warning against the rigorous teaching of grammar, struck me as both ironic and symptomatic of a serious problem. I was ineluctably drawn away from my own academic specialty, translating ancient Greek and Latin poetry, into the research that has come to fruition in these pages. My purpose is to persuade the reader that formal instruction in grammar ought to be emphasized in K-12 education, especially in the middle grades, 4th through 6th. It is particularly important that students be able to classify words according to the parts of speech. This change is long overdue, and I had hoped that it would become a part of American academic reform, as is currently the situation in England. Perhaps this book will be a step in that direction. Hey folks, I hope that you enjoyed that reading. I'm hoping that this will stimulate discussion among my colleagues and myself, my administrators, perhaps even parents and colleagues in other school districts who are involved in language arts instruction. Hey, there's one thing that was in that reading that caught my ear is I also teach German, and I have a Spanish teaching colleague as well. And that is, students struggle learning foreign languages because they don't know their own language. They don't know their own English grammar. And I have two pieces of evidence. One is from the 1980s. This was a book that I bought at Northern Michigan University, English Grammar for Students of German. That's from the Wayback Machine. You can see it has some mileage on it. And most recently, just a few days ago, I studied Koine Greek in the mid-90s. And I would really like to go back and learn it. My son-in-law is a Greek scholar, Greek and Hebrew. I just bought this recently, and with the hopes that hopefully the ravages of time won't affect my ability to try to learn it again, try to recover what I've lost. But there's a chapter in this new edition, and lo and behold, more evidence, and here it is, English Review for Greek. In other words, in the introduction, the author says he included that because his American students that he has down in St. Louis, they don't know English grammar. They arrive in graduate school for an advanced degree not knowing grammar. There's lots of evidence. We can talk about the adjustment of the SAT scores and a number of other tangible evidence that something's happened since the 60s. Lots of bad things have happened from that time. The adoption of boneheaded approaches to language instruction that jettisons grammar is one significant thing. And I wonder if there's not some connection to a limited degree between the neglect of grammar, that sentences mean things, and the pitiful and tragic level of public discourse that we have in our country, where people are shouted down. There's a lot to think about there, okay? Hey, once again, I hope I hear from you. Feel free to email me. I'd love to talk. There's 2 more videos that I plan on doing like this. The foreword of the book, written by another professor at UW-Milwaukee, and also the big one, Chapter 1 of The War Against Grammar, which is entitled America the Grammarless. It's very good. It gets into a lot of the so-called research and the specious findings. Specious because if you don't know grammar, that sounds pretty good, right? Yeah, grammar's not important. I don't know it, but so it's good. I will buy into that because I couldn't teach it if I wanted to, so I will agree with the NCTE, regardless of what's good for the kids. It does take a certain level of character and courage to say, we're shortchanging our kids. All right, but feel free to talk, and we'll talk some more on our 2 forthcoming videos. We'll see you. Bye-bye.